Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm excited to talk to you all about Chapter 3 of A Course in Miracles. For those of you that haven't been following along, I am reading all of A Course in Miracles, all 365 chapters, to try and strengthen my relationship with God and Jesus and just kind of learn more. And I've heard so many great things about it. So I'm going to read each chapter and then um, take a few parts that really stood out to me and just kind of speak on them a little bit and tell you about some stuff that I learned. So, chapter 3 is called The Innocent Perception. This chapter is a lot about perception and how important perception is. And I like how it talks a lot about judgment in here. I love speaking on judgment. I love what I've learned in this chapter from Judgment 2 and how incredibly important it is to try and stray from judgment whenever we live in such a society that tends to judge so heavily. So I think this hits home. I know it hits home for me a lot, and it may for some of you out there too. But a couple of things that stood out to me that I really loved in this chapter. A couple statements. Good teachers never terrorize students. Okay, people have historically used religion to control people. Historically, unfortunately, that's kind of, I know I grew up, and this isn't anything against my family by any means, but a lot of the things I heard growing up when it comes to God and the devil, and if you're bad, you're going to go to hell. So don't be bad or you'll go to hell, right? It's very fear-based, right? And historically, religion has been used to control people. But truly good teachers, people that are, if you're truly trying to impart knowledge on someone, it never resonated with me. And it talks about in here about how you shouldn't try and scare them into believing your way. You shouldn't try and fear them into listening to you, right? And it goes back to the past few chapters. The chapters spoke so heavily on when you're in a state of fear, you are not as connected, or you're not in alignment with God. Not so you're not connected, you're always connected, but you're not as in alignment with God and that kind of thinking and love and in faith. So if you're in fear, you're actually not in alignment with what God wants you to be in alignment with. He wants you to be feeling love and acting out of love and faith, right? And I wrote, I just made a few notes about how, that's how I always thought, is if I'm bad, I'm going to hell, and that's just not the way, that's not a good, beneficial way to be thinking about things. Also, in regards to miracles, this is a course in miracles. To perform miracles, you can't be in that fear-based state. That cuts you off from being able to perform miracles. We can all perform miracles, but you can't if you're in this fear-based state. So good teachers never terrorize students. If if you're being taught by someone or in some concept of someone trying to scare you into believing what they want you to believe, you should probably second guess that. If you're in charge of someone, or if you're helping someone, or if you're mentoring someone, make sure you're not doing it in a place that's causing them fear, because if they're in fear, you're gonna separate them from their alignment with God and with that kind of thinking and love. So you don't want to do that, obviously. Like I said, I mentioned when you're in fear, you have a lack of faith, right? God is love. He loves you. And even if you were, it talks about this. If you were bad in your past, you can still be forgiven, and he won't hold that against you. A lot of people hold on to guilt from their past. And the perception is, if I was bad in my past, I'm going to be punished for it. When the reality is forgiveness is available for us all. So it's so important to know that, because guilt and shame can do horrible things to the subconscious mind, and it can start to manifest into illness in your energetic body, which creates illness in your physical body. So not to go off on a tangent there, but know that God loves you, and he does forgive you. You can be forgiven. It's so important to understand that. He is merciful. Good can withstand any form of evil, as light abolishes forms of darkness. Something foundational to know there. I loved that. The innocence of God is the true state of the mind of his Son. What a powerful statement. The innocence of God is the true state of the mind of his Son, Jesus Christ. What is Jesus Christ's mind like? Pure love, right? He comes from a place of love, of kindness, of compassion, of non-judgment. So this chapter, they talk and they kind of define that innocence. What is the innocence of God? Well, look to what Jesus Christ, how he was as an example, how his mind was as an example, how we should all strive to be that way. Innocence becomes a viewpoint with a universal application and then it becomes wisdom. So innocence in itself can become a specific viewpoint because you can apply it to multiple different things, right? And coming from a place of innocence and knowing that yes, you can be forgiven and that you are a child of God and you're loved, having that in itself is such wisdom. So this one now it jumps more into judgment here, which I do love speaking on judgment a lot. It says, all your difficulties will stem from the fact that you do not recognize yourself, you do not recognize your brother, or you do not recognize God. Right? It means to recognize means to know again, to not judge. We tend to judge ourselves harshly. Right? We come down on ourselves harshly when we make mistakes. No one's perfect. We're all human, right? You're going to make mistakes. And if you start to judge yourself, you're going to feel bad. It's going to give you that low vibrational state, and then you may start to slip into fear. You can have difficulty there. Judging your brother, if you judge other people, which I'm going to talk to more in a second because the chapter really gets into judgment a little more down near the bottom, or not knowing God, not really taking the time to get that relationship with God and knowing that. So your difficulties are going to stem from judging yourself, being harsh on yourself, judging your brother, or not having that relationship with God. So it's something good to foundationally know and just kind of keep yourself in check with all three of those areas. This is cool too. I really like this. So this statement said, the abilities you now possess, because we're all given gifts, we're all given abilities, right? So the abilities you now possess are only shadows of your real strength. All of your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. This is because you are not certain how you will use them and therefore incapable of the knowledge. So what I pull from that is I feel like it's talking about purpose, right? Everyone's been given gifts and abilities. Maybe you know what your gifts and abilities are. It's as an example of mine. I was in sales for years, in medical software sales, and I always thought that was, my ability was the ability to be able to perform well in sales. But that was a fraction of it. That really wasn't my gift, was the ability to connect and communicate. That was my gift. And it wasn't until I realized my purpose, which is, helping inspire and develop others, and eventually, part of my purpose is helping people find God within themselves and have that relationship and all that. But that's my purpose. So when you find your purpose, you'll know so much deeper on what your abilities are actually used for. So that's something to think about. If you have gifts or if you have abilities, whichever one of you do, if you already know what they are, that's great. Start thinking about the perception of their purpose. If you can find out what their purpose could be for, they become so much more powerful because it goes back to the first few chapters. It brings it into your faith. If you know what your purpose is and it ties into your gifts, how much faith and confidence do you have that you're going to be great at what you do because you know it's your purpose. So I thought that was really cool. They talk about the ego in this chapter too. So the ego is the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. It is capable of asking questions, but not of perceiving meaningful answers, because these would involve knowledge that cannot be perceived. So the ego, right? The ego is here to protect us, but it thinks in like these things need to make logical sense. Whereas a lot of what our spirit within us goes off of intuition, right? That deep knowing and that deep faith. Truth comes from within. Truth comes from that intuition, comes from within. You're going to have all these external things, especially right now. There's a lot of fear out there, and there's a lot of people attaching to these fears, and these are all ego-based things, especially in judgment, which we'll get to in a second. But with anything, take any information and always go within. See how it resonates within you, because your truth will be found within you, nothing externally. We talked about that last chapter too, right? So the ego is it's not, I'm not trying to demonize it by any means, but it was it, your all your true answers are found within. They're not found utilizing that ego. So this was cool too. I love this. You heard the terminology, many are called but few are chosen. Well, in this chapter they say, it should say all are called but few choose to listen. How powerful is that? All are called. Everyone's called, but few choose to listen. Um, and then right after that, it says God cannot make the decision for you. Uh, so we have free will. We all have free will. That's what this is talking about, right? We can do whatever we want. We have free will, but you know, our best decisions and the decisions that are going to serve us the best are the ones that are in alignment with God. And in alignment with God in the sense of we're acting and speaking out of love, then we're choosing to listen. The ego tends to get in the way. The ego, or the maybe short-term gratification-based things, or thinking, getting offended by things, whatever the case may be, all that is ego-based. And whatever decisions you're making, if they're ego-based and they're to like serve you or in some way like that, it's not going to be in alignment with God. You're going to have so many signs. I'm telling you, there are so many signs and so many messages all in your day, in this universe, in this beautiful universe that was created for us. Some of you may be looking for a sign. Here's your sign. You're going to be getting messages about purpose and about what you're supposed to be doing. But all are called. All are called. And the way you answer that call is by acting and aligning yourself with God. God is love. Acting and coming from a place of pure love, the perception of the true feeling of love, right? But ego tends to get in the way of that. The most meaningful prayer is the prayer of forgiveness. That's amazing. I love that so much. Forgiveness is the healing. This is a powerful statement. So listen to this. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation. Because when you are separated from God, you can never be separated, but when you perceived you're separated from God is when you're acting or doing things that aren't in alignment with God. Maybe you're coming from ego, maybe you're making bad decisions, whatever the case may be. You feel like you're separated from God. It doesn't say separation from God, it says perception of separation from God. That's an important distinction because you can never be separated. And when you're perceived to be separated, that's when you're making bad decisions, when you're doing things that aren't for your highest good, that you may be involved in like sin, stuff like that, right? Forgiveness is the healing of that. And you can always be forgiven, no matter how bad you are. I had a horrible past. I was big into drinking, binge drinking. I was partying with most of them up in New York and just making a ton of bad decisions. And I did have a lot of guilt for that. Before my spirituality, and looking back, I had that, but I can be forgiven, and I was forgiven for that, right? No one's perfect. We all make bad decisions sometimes, right? We all have a past, but you can be forgiven for that. Okay, so I love that. Forgiveness is the healing of the perception of separation, the perception of being separated from God, which is making those bad decisions, right? Making things that aren't for your highest good, that aren't in alignment with who you really are, which is love. And this last part is so powerful. You have no idea the tremendous release and deep peace that comes from meeting yourself and your brothers totally without judgment. We live in a world that judges. I mean, there's so much judgment, even in my family right now. I'm unfortunately not even speaking to some, that they aren't speaking to me because of judgment, because we all have different views on things, and it's unfortunate, but there's so much judgment out there, right? And it's so important to push. We are not in a place to judge. You never know what someone else is going through, and everyone's always on their own. Everyone's in their own. I'm trying to think how to explain this. I feel like we can perceive each other as all being love, because we are all love, just at different stages of spiritual development, then we wouldn't judge each other. You don't know what someone else is going through, and everyone's on their own journey. It's best to always come from a place of love and compassion and kindness. But unfortunately, there is a lot of judgment out there, and judgment, all that does is push people further away from what you may be trying to do. Even if the intention is good, when you judge someone, you push them even further away. So it says you have no idea the tremendous release and deep peace when you're meeting yourself and your brothers without judgment. Don't judge yourself. If you make a mistake, learn from the mistake. Ask for forgiveness and learn from the mistake. If you don't necessarily agree with your brothers or sisters are doing, if you want to talk to them about it, that's fine, but don't judge them. Be the example. The best thing you can do is be the example, right? When it talks about the innocence of God is in the mind of his son, think about the mind of his son, Jesus Christ. The best possible example out there is Jesus Christ, right? At least in my perception and what I'm reading, right? So stray from judgment. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge others. If you make a mistake, that's okay. Just learn from it. Move on. Know you can be forgiven. Ask for forgiveness. Know you can be